The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
And welcome back to another Home Field Advantage. My name is Tony Kurre. I'm the host, of course, of Tony Kurre Radio, and I have been blessed with Teresa Autrey. She is wonderful with myexit.co. Exit Realty does fantastic work. It's a show I've been wanting to do. I told you, Teresa, I've known Teresa for 30-something years. It's a show I've been wanting to do for a long period of time, and she is just perfect. And man, she can rattle it off. She can talk. She loves what she does, and she's very, very good at what she does when it comes to the mortgage business. There's so much stuff going on right now. If you listen to our inaugural show, which of course ran at least 5 times on Tony Kurre Radio or wherever you get your favorite podcast. We're available on every major industry. There's nothing we're not available on. You go back and listen to our first show. And I had so many questions and so many different ways I wanted to go. And I said, we really need to get specific with what we're talking about here. And so I said, rein me in a little bit, because great interviews like yourself, when you answer a question, you give me 50,000 more questions. So I'm busy just writing things down, and I know you're a writer too. But you recently just went through a code of ethics. I'm assuming it's some type of seminar, and you have to go through that, every 3 years? Is that what you said?
Yes.
And that basically just kind of gives you what? What exactly does that do in the mortgage business?
Well, in mortgage real estate, all of us have a code of ethics.
Yeah.
So like as a realtor and a member of NAR, is demanded every 3 years, and it's really necessary to be straight. It's just because sometimes you're not faced with the same issues today as you were in 3 years. Look at technology.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example, but it's basically a standard of practice that we all agree to, and we agree to maintain our public, our peers, and the professional respect that the industry deserves. And actually, it's funny because I found out a new fact yesterday. Being in the business is a rarity, but I'm not saying I know everything, but I like to find out new stuff.
All right, good. Well, let's hear about some of that new stuff. If you need to get in touch with Teresa, you're a buyer, you're a seller, you're a renter, you're a mortgage person, you don't have a house, you never had a house, you don't know what your credit looks like, whatever real estate, you want to buy commercial, whatever you want to do, Teresa Autrey is the way to go. It's myexit.co, or call her. She'll pick up the phone, 294-4210. 294-4210. You can also go, of course, to Tony Kurre Radio, info@tonykurreradio.net, info@tonykurreradio.net, and leave us any of your questions. We'll answer questions, emails throughout the week and everything else. All right, code of ethics. And you gave me a couple things here that you actually learned about. These are things that obviously you know about, but things are always changing. And one of those things that I think is really interesting, that as a homeowner, I'm a renter right now, but I'm definitely going to get back into a home when, first of all, I can afford it and I can find a place. And of course, I know who I'm going to be going through to make that happen. I'm looking at her. But insurance is a really interesting thing. And I'm hearing a lot about insurance. Not only, the most of the things I've heard about, Teresa, and just go with me here, are things on the coast. I'm understanding that there's a lot of mortgage businesses, a lot of insurance companies. And I've got a good friend of mine, Chris Doris, works with State Farm. It's been a friend of mine for 30 years. They're no longer even servicing a lot of homes in and around hurricane areas, areas that were never flood prone, or now it seems like everything is flood prone, and people are having a hard time getting flood insurance. So let's start there. First of all, how important it is to get insurance, and what exactly does that mean to a homeowner?
Well, I think it's required, number one, unless you pay cash for the home. And if you've got that kind of money, a lot of those are self-insured. And, you probably need to speak with your lawyer or financial advisor about that. But there are state requirements and federal requirements that if you have a mortgage on something, it has to have insurance to cover the replacement cost. We all talked about the last show. We touched briefly on how much lumber cost had risen, for example, since the COVID. And, traditionally, and this is the whole reason for education, is like I literally sat in front of a insurance broker this week who broke a lot of things down for us, that we look, and this is his words, his name's Scott Nesbitt, but he looked and he said, we look at the page with the money on it. How much is it costing? What's my, this, what's it cost? What's the deductible? Blah, 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 blah. The damages and all that. He said, what we don't look at is other things. And one of those, for example, was there's a lot of policies right now And I don't mind. I always cite my sources. So this is not a shameless plug. This is just where I got the information from.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And his name's Scott Nesbitt, and he's with Allison Insurance there. And he was saying that they don't even cover past like Central Alabama. Now, I'm from Mobile, Dauphin Island area, so, I love me some coast.
Sure.
And I know that south of I-10 is hurricane. We call it hurricane horror insurance because it's about what you're paying for.
Yeah.
But he made us aware of some things like there are certain areas that are no fault state. And
which means what?
Well, like it's no one's fault, like kind of like community property state in the marriage.
So they don't have to cover it.
Well, what it means is that maybe the homeowner could have picked up something and done something to prevent it, but
Gotcha.
they didn't. So it's at this point, it takes more money to fight it out than to just let's be done with it. So you got to remember the insurance companies are about saving money. And I was so grateful for this gentleman's transparency because, I have a lot of investors, I have a lot of builders, and we hear the standard 30-year, 3-dimensional roof. Well, in the state of Alabama, it's really not 30 years because even I knew that it's prorated. And in the state of Alabama, 18 to 20 years is what's typically expected due to hurricane tornadoes, due to the heat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, literally, we can have 4 seasons in a day.
Sure.
I joke with my northern clients, you don't like the weather, wait a minute, it'll change.
Yep.
Just hold on.
You're right. You're right.
Take all winter clothes, all summer clothes, all seasonal clothes out when you go show properties.
Mm-hmm.
Just never know.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. And he explained that roof's over 10-year-old. And I was like, what? And even I had an investor and an agent in the room who also replaced roof for years, and he is part owner. And he says, well, what about these? We hear this. He asked the exact question I was thinking. And he said, yeah, 10 years. And that's a hard line for some insurance companies. And I thought, okay, but do people know that?
So after your roof turns 10 years old, it is no longer covered by your insurance company. And
I'm not sure what that part means. Because we asked the question, well, if we're buying a home,
yeah,
and the roof is over 10 years old, and I know this because my son's looking to buy, and he looked at a beautiful old historical home,
mm-hmm.
and it had a metal roof.
Yeah.
And I couldn't understand the question because I'd never heard it, and it was like, well, exactly how old is the roof? Like, exactly.
Wow.
That's pretty specific wording.
Mm-hmm.
The best we hope to get is $50 on the next sheet, an exact number.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't know, let me check. And I knew it was a metal roof, which metal and the ceramic tile are guaranteed for 50 years. That's what they consider lifetime now. And then the other ones are 30-year 3-dimensional. And builders spend money to get that little extra upgrade for the state here. And so I want to be supportive of the industry standards. And so that's why I was even surprised. And they said that currently right now, one was still taking on policies. But other than that, they were recommending roof replacements.
Let me ask you this. And again, you give me like 8,000 questions because your answers are so thorough. But for people who do have homes, because we're 4 hours from the beach and I love the beach and I know that we have a climate issue and I know that the storms are getting worse and it's getting hotter and the ocean's getting warmer. If you have been told, and I think a lot of people think that because you buy a house, you deserve to have insurance. You don't. No one has to insure your home, and they can give any reason they want, regardless of what the situation is. But if you have been insured by someone for a long period of time, and all of a sudden your insurance company says, we're no longer covering coastal areas anymore, what do you do as a homeowner?
That's why I was grateful for this person being a broker because we all asked that question, because here again, we need to be that accurate vessel for the public.
Mm-hmm.
And we can only give the information that we are susceptible to and get knowledge of. So as he was speaking, I like the fact that that was a huge issue. Also, I've run into, this has never been in a floodplain ever, and it goes back 100 years. Well, a lot flooded during Katrina, and that broke the 100-year floodplain, like it or not.
Wow, yeah.
And because that's, floodplain insurance dictates that. And then you have, and let's not forget, we don't get better as we go north. We've got Tuscaloosa, Tornado Alley, it seems like. And in the north, near Cheehaw, think about the Talladega National Forest, and we're a moist state. We just are on the insurance spectrum because of the humidity, because of the terrain. And we are so blessed to have the largest peak in Alabama, Mount Cheehaw, and then the coast is just a few hours away.
Yeah. But
that provides a lot of safe harbors for termites. And a lot of people don't understand. They'll just get a termite policy and think, I'm good today.
Yeah.
Well,
that's incredible. All right. So you just went through this code of ethics. This is really amazing because I kind of feel like you're pulling back the curtain on something that I should know, which is really neat as a potential owner and a buyer. Brokers versus agents. You wanted me to ask you about that. What's the difference between brokers and agents, and how does that play out?
Well, this is the hugest thing that not just the public and not just the agents, but even people that are associated or affiliated with the real estate industry, which in my opinion is pretty much everybody on the planet in some form or fashion. And so it's to know that ultimately, whether it, number one, a broker's got a lot of access, a lot more access to a lot of different things. And you have to have a qualifying broker to run a real estate company in the state of Alabama. Not to own it, but you have to have a qualifying broker to run it.
Okay.
The other thing is that the buck stops with that person, though. Everything is governed under that person's license. And that's why we learned that it's our responsibility, whether you're a qualifying broker like mine is, Gina Malcolm, or an associate broker like Teresa Autrey, then you are responsible to ensure that all the agents are knowledgeable. And the one thing is, you can't obey the law if you don't know what the law is.
Yeah.
And you've got to know the current law, not the law of 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, it's across the board with the insurance gentleman that was a broker. He had access to knowledge I know that my local people didn't have access to. And he sort of did for me, like pulled the curtain back and said, here you are. And when you say come up with a resolution.
Yeah, when you say knowledge, what are we talking about here? Can you give me an example?
Well, you can read a law and you can think it one way.
Yeah.
But if I know the history of why that law came to be, and I know that law's been played out true and tried in a system, and it's got a proven track record, I may be able to understand it and explain it. And what I always deem as an expert is it's almost like engineering in reverse. So you need to be able to explain the process inside and out, not just from the outside in.
Gotcha.
Because each layer is like an onion. Each layer is another layer of information.
Teresa Autrey, she's with myexit.co. It's Exit Realty, does fantastic work. I got a chance to come out and do your grand opening several months ago and met a lot of people there. They were just super, super nice, and she does wonderful work. It's called Home Field Advantage, brand new podcast that is going to be up and coming. Because, I mean, listen, the housing market right now is unlike anything I've ever seen. I know the Fed's talking about doing some with the rate, whether it's going to go up a quarter or go down a 0.25%, 0.5%, whatever. It's constantly changing. And obviously we have some bigger issues. If you listen to last week's episode, we got into it a lot. If you want to buy a home right now, and you're a regular Joe and you haven't saved $60,000, $70,000, it's really difficult. First of all, to find a home in the area of town you want to find, and first of all, to find a home, period. There's a shortage of that, and that's what this show is all about. We're going to try to walk you through it. We're going to help you out, and then when you're ready, Teresa, she's the one to call, 294-4210, 294-4210, myexit.co. You mentioned no-nos. I'm not sure exactly what no-nos, but I love that. It kind of got me excited. When a woman looks at me and she said, these are no-nos, I get a little excited.
Well, that's about getting that marketing.
There you go. What are some of the no-nos that you learned in your code of ethics?
Man, it was just so exciting because I thought that some of these, and it explains why it takes so long to change something, because they were built in 1913. And that's what I learned yesterday is how they formulated themselves. And I love the history of any organization that's been around, 100 years. So what they were saying is that the first code of ethics was done by doctors, which you had to have a license for. The second one was, believe it or not, by engineers.
Wow.
That you had to have a license for.
Mm-hmm.
The third one was for lawyers, which you have to have a license for. And we were the fourth one.
Wow.
The law area of the law of real estate. And so real estate became the fourth one, and we adapted the code of ethics. And there's been, the same code of ethics set forth that we're going to maintain to the public, to our peers, to other professionals. And I think that that's so fundamental, because in today's world, in the economy we're in, like you said, never seen before, sometimes you just got to go back to the basics and say, we were founded on these principles. This is where we're at. And we want to make sure that we're established on a good foundation to make sure that we have the public's trust.
So what are some of these no-nos they talked about? What are some of these things?
Whenever you respond to anything, it must be not only trustworthy, which means you should know to where you are able to cite the sources. Like I can say that this is printed off from the National Association of Realtors, and they put their stamp on there. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, bear right with me because I actually wrote something down. You must have in writing your relationship to the client. So there's no more, like you must have, there's no more of this, well, let's just think about it. Let's just, you got to know your responsibilities and the client's responsibilities.
Really?
And it can't be a break. Like years ago, believe it or not, somebody might get you to sign something for a year. You speak to them the whole first week and you don't see them again till it's check time.
Yeah.
Well, it actually, the law states that it must be with no break. It must be continuous communication.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. Just because you got something signed on day one and you don't talk to them. Now, there are, circumstances like maybe an investor says, hey, I'm looking for anything over $12 million. Well, that may take more than 6 months to find.
Sure.
And so it's stuff like that. And then let's see. Hold on one second.
Sure.
The other thing is each office or each company should have a policies and procedures. And not just that, if you're a member of NAR, which is your National Association of Realtors, you cannot go outside of that code of ethics. However, if you do not belong to NAR, then it's kind of like you set your own situation up.
Yeah.
And then now the new word is compensation, and it was so funny because the first week, I am not joking with you. The first week when they said it's no longer commission, it's the Alabama Real Estate Commission, and then our compensation, I immediately thought back to, and I kid you not, this is when the market went down and I had moved to Vestavia Hills and I moved into a smaller place to be closer in. And this man tried to pay me with a horse.
Really?
And I was like, dude, I live in Vestavia. Where am I going to put a horse on my roof? And I could just see when that compensation came up yesterday, I couldn't help but giggle.
That's hilarious. That's funny. Only in the state of Alabama, for sure. That's great. Well, thanks for sharing some of those code of ethics. I think that's really cool to kind of pull it back. That's what we want to do on this show. Not only talk about obviously the rates and the different parts of town and where to buy homes and everything else that you are an expert in, but also some of the things that perhaps we don't know. 294-4210. Yeah, we want to sell some homes, and I certainly want you to call Teresa Autrey. She's the best at myexit.co, but we also want you to be smart about what you're doing. I have owned 4, 5, 6, 7 different homes in my living, and because of a divorce, I'm now taking a bit of a break from that. And for some reason, it feels kind of good for me just to kind of exhale a little bit, to kind of get out of the mortgage business. But I do feel because the way the mortgage, and right now, obviously we're so many homes short in this country, and we just described and understood why that was last week. If you listen to the show on Tony Curre Radio, wherever you get your favorite podcast on Home Field Advantage. But I do feel like I've been spun out of that hurricane, and now I'm going to have a really difficult time getting back in. If you're in a situation where I think a lot of people are, and that is you're paying more rent than you're used to paying in mortgage. We used to rent so we could save money for a mortgage, and now it's kind of twisted on its head. Now we're spending more on rent than we are in mortgage, and you want to get back into the buying mode. What kind of timetable are you looking at? And I would say this: I've not done a very good job. I've seen homes, and I used to be kind of afraid that if I didn't put an offer down on a home, someone was going to buy it from me. Now, the last couple of years, that has been so true, right? I mean, people are going in offering $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 more than a home's worth, and they're paying cash for it. It just got out of control. But if you're wanting to get back into the mix, tell people how they should get started. On top of just obviously making a phone call to you?
Well, they could call myself or their local mortgage person, whoever they deem that to be, and find out first if who they bank with is traditional hard money, okay, or if they have alternate programs. And I always say it's easier to get money from where you got money.
Yeah.
So sometimes, but if you're with with a certain bank like Regions or something, that may be more difficult because of some sanctions they endured when everything happened. So we all get little updated laws and rules. But the first thing is establish, like for instance, you had almost an identical situation that I had. When I opened my company, number one, I wasn't married, so I had no other stable income, if that's what you want to call marriage. But I'm not sure. Yeah. I meant that as a joke, guys.
We thought that way.
Did you say fault?
I thought that way and fought that way. Yes, in both ways. Yes.
So I would say establish your first a good rental history. And then, like for us, hey, I've been doing this 2 decades, but however, my company only was open this long. And then anytime you change something and you move that LLC or you give that away and start a new one, it's like you start all over again with that 2-year period that us self-employed people get to endure, you know? So basically it's 24 months. And what I tell people is, how far in your business do you want the government?
Yeah.
Because the more you ask, the more they ask. And that's just how we get out like that.
Yeah, that's kind of how it works. We've got a lot of people interested in this show. Obviously, info@TonyCurreRadio.net, info@TonyCurreRadio.net. I've got a friend of mine named Barbara, who I work with, and she's fantastic. And she wanted me to ask you the question, back in the day, and I say back in the day, 10, 15 years ago, you go out, you had a certain amount of money, you were already proposed, or you were dispositioned on, you were told, hey, you could afford this, that, and the other, and you'd go out shopping, and you'd go look 5, 6, 7 different homes. You'd write down which ones you like and why you don't like this and pros and cons and this, that, and the other. And then you'd go out and put a bid on homes. She said she's afraid it'll never be like that again. I guess what she said, because it seems like there's just so many lack of homes. There's no homes out there. Will it ever be at a point where we feel like we can actually do some shopping and it's not going to be pulled out from underneath us? And I guess, and a show for another time, is we obviously know there are a lot of different people, maybe not even from this country, that are coming into the United States and buying a lot of properties too, so they can put them out for rental things. But will we get back to the old way of doing homes?
Well, this is what I've always told my clients, because when I first started, my first client was a buyer, and I was more naive then. 200 houses later, he bought the first house he ever saw.
Wow.
And that's 4 months of my life I'm never going to get back. So, that gave me a little teeny tiny edge of, you better damn well be approved to buy something when you go looking.
Yeah.
I don't like shopping anyway, but if we're going to spend your money, we'll spend it any way you want, but you're buying something.
Yeah.
And if I've done my job to make sure that the expectations are both relayed and conveyed on both parties. Like, here's my expectations. And now I will say COVID helped a little bit with that because we were getting fined. People used to want to go window shop, tire kick, and buy it on some whimsical romantic fairy tale that they watched too much Hallmark movies about.
Mm-hmm.
And people not only need to buy with emotion, yes, but they need to have the facts to back up those emotions. Or at least that's how I sleep at night.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many people are so knowledgeable in their area that seek your help, and is really humbling because I would seek their help if I needed something in their area. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It seems to me, we talk about neighborhoods. In the neighborhood I live in right now, I actually know my neighbors. It's kind of nice. And I knew the neighbors in my last neighborhood, but before that, I didn't know anybody. And it was because everyone just kept moving. Back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, where my mom and dad lived, the same neighbors were in those homes for 40, 50, 60 years. No one moved. It was just that. And I realized it was a rural area and it was a different part of the country. What is the average? And then we got to get going, but I got a million questions and we'll have to pick this back up next week. But what is, are you obviously seeing people that are not staying in homes as long as they used to, right? For people to buy a home and stay in it for 10 or 15 years, it doesn't happen anymore, does it?
Well, it depends on the stage of life, and I'll break it down real quick for you.
Yeah.
It's in new construction, because that's my historical background. My average homeowner stayed in the house 7 years.
Okay. Is that normal?
And what happened is during that first 7 years, they're establishing their home. They're about to have some children. They grow into that home.
Gotcha.
As the kids grow or they get job relocated, we mentioned those 7 reasons. Like, for instance, I remember when I had to go from a nice, sweet sports car to an SUV because my children were Amazon children.
Mm-hmm.
And they were 5'8" and I'm still 5 foot,
Yeah, I got you.
So it's one of those you transition. Or maybe your son or daughter specializes in this or that and say they need to move, or they're military. Or, a lot of corporations turnover is every 7 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the data and you look at the industry and what's going on economically, that kind of backs up the next move. And you can just study as best you can and be prepared as best you can.
Well, if you need someone that knows just everything, knows the business inside and out, she's Teresa Autrey, and I'm so blessed to have you on every single week. And we're going to talk this. I'm really looking forward to it because I am going to buy a home. I'm in a rental here for at least another year and a few months. But as I go looking for homes, and I'm looking for what I'm going to do for my family and my next home, we're going to be able to discuss that through the show. So it's going to be kind of cool to actually see how it works, and I'll have questions.
Do a real life case study.
You talk about real life radio. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be an awesome podcast for that.
I've always wanted to do this. That's so ironic that you mentioned that because I didn't even think about that to just now. But I've always wanted to do I wonder if someone would just let me do this. And I think that's great because as we were talking earlier, I said, let's do a show about renters.
Yeah.
And because we were talking about what kind of renters. And I said, it's not just divorced people. It could be a parent died, loss of income. It could be change of job. It could be what happened to my son's friend. He went to Emory, got a great job in Atlanta, just got transferred to UAB, where the cost is half of what it costs to live in Atlanta. But the job pay is the same.
Well, there you go.
So do you see what I mean? It's just like all kind of things. And he thought he was going to have to go on the rental. And it's him and his brother just swapped houses. His brother moved to Atlanta. He moved here. I was like,
awesome. Hey, let's talk about that next week. We'll get into rentals because I think there's more people, and you can give us some numbers next week, but I'm sure there's more people renting now than we probably ever had in the history of keeping those types of numbers. We'll get into it. Teresa Autrey, myexit.co, Teresa Autrey, numbers 294-4210, 294-4210. Of course, you can hear this show at least 5 days a week, wherever you pick up Tony Kurre Radio. We're available everywhere. It's an app, and obviously everyone knows where it's at. It's great classic rock and roll. We have 16, 17 other shows. And of course, you can also, where I strongly urge you to go, is go to our podcast. Wherever you find Tony Kurre Radio Podcast, it's Kurre with a K, Kurre. Tony Kurre Radio Podcast, you can hear the show. And of course, it'll be up forever. So you can go back and listen to whatever you need to know.
Hey, Tony.
Yeah, man.
I have to say one last thing.
Sure.
Just go to Best Fix.
Yeah.
Exit Road to Birmingham.
What's that?
Exit Realty Birmingham. They want us to label our office because they're like, who's responsible for this heathen child if I do something wrong?
Exit Realty Birmingham. I'll make sure I say Exit Realty
and so
Birmingham.
That way we know exactly what to say, and we can say it every time with no problem.
I'm learning too, baby. I'm learning too. Hey, until next week, thank you.
See ya.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.